Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So it's a big pleasure being here after a while. So thank you for joining on this talk. So let's start with a survey. So raise your hand if you ever deliver a line of code in production. OK, keep your hands up, please. Keep your hands up. Thanks, 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 thanks. OK, perfect. So how many of you have rolled back at least once? OK, so now look around you. So if you are in the front row, look at back and see how many people have done that. So it's quite common, right? So it's a problem that affects everyone, right? And today I want to demystify that. But not only this, I want to work with me in order to see if everything works. So if you have a mobile phone and you want to, let's say, go to this website, you can play with me in this session. And it would be great if during the session you can refresh every now and then this page. So don't listen only to me, only time to time refresh. And if everything goes fine, you will have something like this. So I'm not a designer. Probably you spot it straight away. I'm definitely not good with that. I'm decent enough with architecture. So I try to use that skill more than being a designer. OK? So this is the website that we currently have. But it's time to deploy the new version. Not this one, but this one. So let's assume that we have an API that we can call, where we can say, for instance, I want to deploy version 2, and I want to use a deployment strategy, like this one. So linear, 10%, etc. You will understand better later on. And then click send. Now send in the request. If everything goes fine, crossing fingers, yes, went. So now, every now and then, refresh the browser, and then you will see what you are going to see. Perfect. So now we can go ahead with the presentation. Who am I? My name is Luca. I'm a serverless specialist. I work for AWS. It's 3 years that I'm working for that. I'm passionate about software architecture, front-end, and serverless, that I think they glue very well together. I'm an international speaker. I had the pleasure to speak from Silicon Valley to Japan, so quite a lot of fun, and a published author. Yeah, today I want to talk about micro-frontends discoverability. So if you have followed me a bit in the last few years, I'm trying to work a lot on the micro-frontend part, because I believe there is a very interesting and compelling story with that, especially when they work alongside microservices. OK, so probably these situations could look familiar to you. So let's assume that we have a single-page application that you're working on. And at some point, let me see if this works, hopefully. Yeah, it works. You need to deploy your new front end, and just deploy that. You put in production. I spoke roughly with hundreds of teams in the last 3 years worldwide that I helped migrating to micro-frontends. And this is like quite common. So you just deploy a new version. You can replace the existing one. You might have some problem with the cache, but if you are wise, you're using versioning or hash at the end of the file, and you use that. But in general, this is how it works, right? But with micro-frontends, it's slightly more difficult. Everyone, when you have like a client-side rendering micro-frontends in this example, just to continue with the single-page application example, what you have is this situation here. You have like multiple teams that needs to deploy in production, and you need to make sure everything is working. There is no caching that is preventing to have a, let's say, fluid experience for the user, and so on and so forth. Now, in December 2021, yeah, 2022, sorry. No, 2021, yeah. 2021, I had these, I was, let's say, reviewing where we stand in the micro-frontends community, what we are missing, what we can do better. I always have like around December, a couple of weeks off. Yes, I don't have much more than, let's say, being a father and thinking about micro-frontends in my spare time. And therefore, I was thinking, yeah, but micro-frontends are lacking on a way to discover them and delivering in a decent way. That's a problem I have seen over and over and over again with teams. They are building this amazing solution, they want to deploy, and then they do big bang deployment, or they create a solution that suddenly works for them. And every team, or the, let's say, more mature team, were creating their own solution for delivering microfrontends. That drives me nuts, because in reality, we can do better as a community. So let's start from the beginning, where my mind was back in the days. So think about JavaScript. Vast majority of the time, and microfrontends in general, you have this dichotomy. You have either static versus dynamic import. So if we take, for instance, single SPA, we're talking about SPA so far. So single SPA is a framework for creating microfrontends, and this fantastic framework that's well supported and well used by the community. In this case, you have an import map where you have like all your JavaScript chunks, that the modules that are loaded remotely, and the vast majority of the examples that you see are similar to this one. So you just start to have like all different microfrontends pointing to an API, and similarly, when you go into Module Federation, that is a let's say a plugin for Webpack. It would be Zach, it would be later on, this is the creator of Module Federation on this stage, and we'll provide you a glance of the future that is quite bright, in my opinion. But here, you can, as you can see, vast majority of the time, you have this kind of situation here. You just have like your static files. But I imagine, let's go with the survey, because I started to get, let's say, I like this kind of thing. So how many of you have multiple environments at work? So you have like a stag or a pre-prod and prod, etc. So everyone. That's normal, right? So, but sometimes with microfrontends happens that I'm working on one, but that is living inside the page, but then I need to see that if it works with the others that are living that page, but I don't want to use the dev one, I want to use the more stable one in pre-prod, just to make sure that everything works, and if everyone does the same, it will work very nicely. And these usually I've seen developers and teams that have created like their own solution. Sometimes was one that I remember vividly, was a plugin for Chrome that basically intercept the request and was rewriting to another URL. I found, okay, so interesting, but that's not very scalable. So what about dynamic import? Can we do that? And the goal for us with microfrontends was, okay, so we have an application shell, because we are still in the client-side rendering world, but even in the server-side rendering world, will work exactly the same way. And suddenly, I have to load microfrontend C. How do I know where is microfrontend C? How do I know which is the version of microfrontend C? How does it work, basically? So when I was thinking about that, as I said, I'm passionate about architecture. So for me, you know, despite the implementation details that are extremely important, but if you have clarity of intention, you will find a solution for whatever problem it is. And in the world of microservices, in the world of service meshes, etc., one of the things that really helped nailing the problem of these kind of things that you have also with microservices, especially when you work not in an event-driven fashion, but point-to-point between services, is the idea of service registry pattern or discovery pattern. And that works very easily. Every time that you deploy a microservice, this registers itself into this, let's say, dictionary or, let's say, service. It's called service registry. And every time that someone is calling, you are not calling directly the service. You're calling the registry that tells you this is the DNS, IP, whatever you used, for calling the microservice. In this way, you can evolve the microservice. You are completely independent. Also, if you make a change on the DNS or whatever, it's not going to be a problem, because at the end, no one is calling you directly. That is exactly what we are looking for in the case of discoverability on microfrontends. And then I was thinking, OK, so we discover a new version. Pretty cool. But we can do better, because now we are in the middle between the application shell, so the container of microfrontends, and the microfrontend itself. So we are at the network level. We are at that piece where we can introduce a bit of latency, but add a lot of value, de-risking the deployment. And we can also think about fallbacks. Let's assume that that call doesn't work. What should I do? Should I just hide the microfrontend? Should I don't know, retrieve the microfrontend from another CDN wherever I want, right? So just to explain what I had in mind when I say de-risking the deployment, there are two things that are really shining in the microservices world. That is the deployment phase in blue-green deployment or canary releases. So if you're familiar with that, blue-green deployment means I have a new version of my service as a catalog v1.4.0. I deploy in production. For now, I have my user that is receiving everything, as you can see, 100% of the traffic towards version 1.2.1, and doesn't even know that 1.40 is there. However, developers, tester, whatever is your way to test your application can definitely test in production, see if everything works, and everyone is super happy. At some point, they say, OK, I'll redirect 100% of the traffic towards the new version. That is a very nice way to deploy your application, because you create not only a safe net for developers, but you foster fast feedback loop. And I can tell you a story also about canary releases. Canary releases works in this way. You just associate a percentage of traffic towards one version and another. In my previous company, probably you have heard about that, it's called The Zone. We were doing that, and we allow the developers to specify the percentage, the browser, and the country. We started to have developers that were deploying multiple times per day. I remember 25 times for the video player when we released this capability in one day. And they, instead of rolling back, they were rolling forward. That is a completely different mindset, because now you create a fast feedback loop for developers. They can test in production, see that works without affecting the entirety of their user base. That is brilliant, because you create, let's say, the right culture inside your organization. Is not just creating and deploying content, but is also creating the right way and safe net for developers to make them successful. So what I did in 2022, from December 2021, we moved to January 2022, I created a POC for a single SPA and for a module federation, and I said, Zach, Joel, I have this idea. Zach is the creator of Module Federation, is here, so you will meet him later on. Joel is the creator of Single SPA. I had the fortune to know them personally, and we engaged for a while, even before that date. And then I have my colleague, Matteo. Matteo is one of the pioneers of microfrontends. He worked in OpenTable. Now he's working in AWS with me. And the interesting thing is that he did let's say, a journey that I started in 2015, he started in 2014, so we were more or less on the same time. There wasn't the concept of the idea of microfrontends, the term didn't exist. But I said, okay, so listen, I cannot work alone on this. Despite I have the idea, I need to work with the community, because the community will strive if we are all aligned. Otherwise, it's not going to work. And therefore, with this working group, and these beautiful people, we started to spend roughly 8 months on discussing, because obviously we were based, Matteo and I are based in London, they are based in West Coast, and therefore a lot of evenings for us, a lot of early mornings for them. But we started to discuss how we can implement all these features inside the application shell. Because in reality, we all agree, this is a problem in microfrontends. Everyone is trying to solve it somehow, but in their own way, we can solve once for all for everyone. And we came up with this idea. At the beginning, we started, oh yeah, we should really create a plugin. We should really write some code. And at the end, I was trying to take a step back, said, listen, guys, today we know those are the frameworks most used, but we don't know in the future. Why we don't create a standard that really help everyone? And we come up with this idea of JSON schema. JSON is probably the lingua franca for JavaScript. And in this case, what we do is creating a unique identifier for your microfrontend. We have a URL dedicated to your microfrontend, where to fetch it. And we have also a fallback if you want to use it. And then we created a metadata. So here we spent, I think, 2 or 3 meetings just discussing, OK, what should be in there? And I can guarantee you there was quite a lot of data over there. But then we started to, towards the end of the 3rd meeting, to move back into the bare minimum, because we can always change, right? And then we said, OK, so but what if I have framework-specific things, or other specific things that could be, for instance, I don't know, I want to load the module federation remote entry alongside all the other chunks, or I want to load the CSS alongside, so the browser doesn't have to wait for knowing what to load. So we have created these extras. Another thing that I've seen customers using extras is for when they have they want to use a different micro-frontend based on the role inside an application. If you're an admin, you will see a micro-frontend. If you are a normal user, you will see another one, stuff like that. And then we said, OK, so perfect. We agree also on the fact that we don't have only the need of discovering micro-frontends. We need also, and probably more importantly, to do the deployment. Perfect. So how can we do that? Yeah, I didn't mention before, but probably you noticed that we can have that every micro-frontend has described with an array. So if you have just one entry, you have one micro-frontend available, but because it's an array, you can have multiple entries. And that means you can also integrate another optional part of the schema that is the deployment. So you can say, I want to have 30% of the traffic is going there. This is not the default one. Probably this default key will be in the next release removed, but for now, let's keep it. And I described no, hang on, let me go back for a second. And as you can see, we have the same on the second micro-frontend, where we have the traffic that is 70% and so on. That is great. So we finally have a way to have multiple versions, to serve them in kind of release fashion. Try to refresh your browser in the meantime. And then suddenly we said, OK, so how can we apply this? And this is basically what in 2019 I was talking in Vegas when I was a customer of AWS. And we have done that in the zone on the edge. So in order to avoid pollution of code, we started to have, let's say, this idea of capturing the request before its origin. And Lambda at the edge was taking care of let's say, offloading the traffic towards one version or the other micro-frontends. We use that also for moving from a monolith application into the micro-frontends world. We could say, OK, everything that is under catalog goes in the micro-frontend. Everything that is, let's say, in all the other routes goes in the old version. And there are fun stories. There is here one of the members of the team that I work with that has a nice picture of me banging the head on the wall when we weren't we found like bugs during the deployment, stuff like that. It was quite a lot of fun, but we learned a lot during that process. And by the way, this architecture allowed us to serve millions of customers with high spike traffic without any problem. OK, so the benefits of this approach. Well, first of all, it works on front-end and back-end. What does it mean? Because you might think, oh, yeah, it's JSON, so I can use only on the back-end. Not always. So I pitched this idea to the staff engineer in the zone while I was in AWS. He was still in the zone. He's still in the zone, actually. And this is, so I took this picture because it's amazing. So this guy, I pitched the idea, I showed the example, and an hour later, he sent me this picture on WhatsApp. I said, listen, you know what? If you have a certain amount of traffic and you have enough clients, the red bar that you can see in that diagram, you will arrive to have a decent split between version 1 and version 2. So also on the front end, without having a back end, if you have enough traffic, it will work. But despite that, what we recommend is using the back end, obviously. It's not very opinionated. We're using JSON. Everyone is using JSON nowadays, so it shouldn't be a problem. Implement that. It's extensible. We created, as we said, the extras field where you can add whatever you need in case you need it. But more importantly, it can be integrated with your existing APIs. If you think about how client-side rendering or server-side rendering application works, you always have like some configuration to load somewhere remotely. So we don't need to do an additional call for retrieving that. You can have a service that is augmenting the information that they already fetch for your client-side rendering approach and implement also this chunk of the JSON that includes the information for the micro-frontends. Pitfalls, because everything is a trade-off in architecture. You must get the configuration before you load anything else. Obviously, the application shell shouldn't have anything baked in. One rule of thumb that I usually explain to all the customers and people that are working with microfrontends is that you need to have the application shell as, let's say, domain unaware as possible. Because the reality is the more you are adding, more awareness you add in the application shell, more coupling you add, and therefore you are deploying them alongside microfrontends that basically creates the wrong behavior inside the architecture. And sooner rather than later, in 6 months, you will see quite a lot of troubles in Paradise. And we don't want to do that. So we want to have a very stable application shell. The logic is inside the microfrontends application shell exposed just enough. And we are happy to do that. Another pitfall that we were interrogating ourselves is that it might be a bit too loose as approach because we have just the JSON schema. We are not enforcing anything. But still, it could be a good starting point. And for security and performance reasons, as I said before, we highly encourage to use the backend, right? Amazing. So we have a solution. We started to work on that, and we publish it. So it's available in GitHub. You can contribute. You can read. There are quite a few customers that took just this schema and start to apply in their things. There are a few frameworks that are using. There are quite a few people that are rallying behind this idea to have a consistent way to retrieve microfrontends and deploy microfrontends. That's great. I really like that. But then it's me that, as usual, in my nights, a few people that knows me, they know that midnight I'm there thinking about this stuff that I know is not normal, but it's who I am. How we can facilitate the adoption? Because the reality, what it means, okay, now we have a schema. Now it means that we have a way to discover is agreed with quite a few people in the community. I spoke also with the creator of Pyral. I spoke with Manfred, that I know is in this conference, and likes the idea. So we need to find a way that a front-end developer or a team that doesn't have a platform team that works, or the developer experience team that is working on this stuff, can adopt these nicely. So what we need to build in reality, what we need to build if the backend is the solution is something like that. We have an application shell that is calling an API, whatever is directly the microfrontend discovery or something else, it doesn't matter. This will retrieve some information from a database, and then it has to loop and apply all the logic that is needed, return back the configuration, and off you go. Now, this is what we call in AWS the undifferentiating heavy lifting, or stuff that when it's there, I know the schema, I know the contract with my APIs, I know what I need to build, I can build it, right? So it's pretty cool that we release, and quite a few customers currently are using, an open source solution that is called Frontend Discovery Service. And this solution is available in GitHub. You can deploy in your AWS account. You click a button, there is a link there. There is a CloudFormation template that will be, let's say, used for deploying this in your AWS environment. And you are seeing it in action right now. The API that I called at the beginning of the call for Postman is basically an API that is available in this service that is deploying my AWS account for deploying a new version. So probably by now, some of you will see something different in the browser if you load it. So that is great because basically we did a canary release deployment live while I was talking. And obviously, if you have observability associated to that, you can also start to think, OK, so we start to see some issues on the new version. I can roll back. And there is an API for that. But why we develop an API? So this is the architecture, by the way. Everything is serverless for a simple reason. You pay for what you use. So if you think about how a developer uses let's say multiple environments, probably production, I hope for you, it will be hit every single second of your life, 365 days per year. But pre-prod and the dev environment, you use probably 5, 6, 7 hours per day during weekdays, not weekends, so why pay for that? And that's the reason why we're using serverless. So this one, and we created an API for one reason. All of you has an automation pipeline. An automation pipeline in every single company is different, and every single company has its own guardrails or capabilities inside that. And something that I don't like usually when I adopt a solution is that is too opinionated. I want to have something that I can plug in my day-to-day, but is transparent. If I'm capable to reach transparency in the solution that I create, I'm an happy camper, because now everyone potentially can do that. Everyone can integrate without too much burden. And in fact, this part of the architecture is a bunch of APIs that can be plugged into your existing CI/CD pipeline. And every time that you deploy your micro-frontend into an S3 bucket or whatever you're using, you can just say, oh, by the way, this is the new version. This is where you can find it. So just store there. There are a few, let's say, DynamoDB table, mainly because we are feature-proof in the future. If we want to change the schema or whatever, we don't need to update just a single DynamoDB table. We can do that. This is basically the back-end part of your service. That is what is deployed inside your AWS account. This is the front-end part. So when your application shell is calling something, we have a very simple API gateway Lambda DynamoDB. Why that? Because we heavily optimize for reads the DynamoDB table in order to have great performances. Just to give you an idea, DynamoDB was created for Amazon.com for supporting the Black Friday events, stuff like that, Prime events. And they scale insanely, especially when you use the right schema. So you optimize for reads in this case. And that's the reason why we selected this simple architecture. It's highly scalable and allows you to, let's say, cover quite a lot of ground without too many troubles. OK, so the other cool thing is that deployment strategies are aligned with what you have today in AWS. So if you want, for instance, to deploy linearly 10% every 10 minutes, this is the first entry of that enum. You can do all at once. Maybe you have like a bug in production and you want to do, like, say, a hotfix. So you just deploy all at once, and it's like a big bang deployment. But you can decide if you want to use Canary, if you want to have a blue-green deployment, how often has to increase the percentage. The system takes care of that by itself. So you don't have to do anything. You just declare what you need, and the system will handle easily that situation. The other thing is that it's pretty cool because it's deploying in one click. So you really, if you have an AWS account, you can try today. It's serverless. Therefore, if you have a brand new AWS account, you are, let's say, sitting in the free tier for a year. So you can try without any problem, as long as you don't invoke more than 1 million of times a Lambda function per month. It's not a bad deal. It works with every front-end architecture. I tried also with the single-page application, because one of the requests I had with the customer is, oh, it's so cool, Luca, you have done amazing stuff for micro-frontends, but what about the application shell? How do I de-risk the application shell to be deployed? No problem. I create a Lambda at the edge. So the service is called by the Lambda at the edge. So every time that I try to serve www.mysite.com, and I need to serve the application shell, I intercept that at the edge and send the request or serve the right application shell version without any issue. So doable, no problem. It integrates with every CI/CD. That's the other thing for me was fundamental. I want transparency. I want that people don't have to change their habits if they don't have to. Because the reality is that we can blend the technology to do whatever we need, but we need to be smart on how we use that, and therefore spending, let's say, a decent amount of time, or better, investing a decent amount of time into designing this architecture was mandatory. It's technology agnostic. So we have seen over the years, as you can see, I'm not very young, but you know, I was there when there was Flashlight 1.1 that didn't have any array, and now I'm here talking about AWS and serverless and micro-frontends, etc. So I've seen a bit. Technology change. It's cyclical. There are quite a lot of things that are changing. If you think about the whole good days with jQuery and then React and now Solid Quick and all the other stuff. So we need to be bulletproof and future-proof, even better. And that's why it has to be technology agnostic. It reduces the blast radius of deploying new front-end version in production. That is exactly what we want. And again, it's not just, I need to stress this fact because often developers think it's only, and that was one of them, it's only the technology that matters. The reality is technology is tightly linked with culture and with the way how you structure your organization. Therefore, it's important you think about the repercussion of your decision, technical decision, into your organization. And monorepo is not just a monorepo, it's a way how your teams are going to communicate with, and therefore it's not a technical decision. It's open source, so you want to contribute? Of course you can. You want to fix a bug? Of course you can. You want to shape the future? Of course you can. So just open an issue on GitHub. And it will be embraced by other tools. There are already discussion with few tools and the framework that want to use that, so that is great. Now, if you check your, let's say, phone again, probably by now you will see, let me see if I see something similar here. Loading system, boom. As I said, I'm not a designer, but now it's something new, and this is a new version of my micro-frontend that is deployed incrementally during this talk, so great. Okay, so when I need to implement this, and this is just, let's say, it's not a library, just, let's say, my POC that I was running in order to show how simple it is. This is module federation implementation. So I created this tiny library in JavaScript. It's called Micro-frontend discovery. You pass the endpoint that you want to use for consuming that. That loads, fetch basically the configuration. And this code here is an example that you have inside the module federation repository. I didn't build this code. I literally wanted to show you transparency. So you download any type of example with module federation. You plug this library that is probably less than 100 lines of code. And you use exactly module federation like you always use. The only thing you change is that you have microfrontend discovery.get. You pass the ID of the microfrontend, and you have all the information that you need. Similar on a single SPA. So a single SPA is slightly more complicated because it's using, let's say, an import maps that is living in the DOM. And therefore, when you import that, you retrieve a list of microfrontends because that's how it works. You don't retrieve microfrontends. You don't retrieve only the remote entry because you need to retrieve all the different microfrontends needed and dependencies. Then you change the import map and you re-append into the head where the import map lives, and the browser automatically will load your microfrontends. Done. So as you can see, not much to do, so depend to add, yeah. So let's try to recap what we have seen today. So we have seen that the discoverability pattern provides us new opportunities. We have a way to make sure that when you speak with your manager or with your CEO, CTO, whatever, you can say, oh, by the way, it's not that invasive using microfrontends. We can try. We can even de-risk the deployment, and we can gather metrics. We can see through the observability dashboard what's going on, and we can start to migrate iteratively. You don't need to ask and sign with your blood an 18-month contract with your CTO and say, oh, yeah, we need to go in stealth mode for 18 months, spin up a new team, and making sure that everything is available in 18 months, deploy, nothing works because you were so far away from main that you didn't capture all the features. I've been there, sorry about that. So the other thing is, you are improving with this solution the discoverability and the deployment strategy. That is something that should be at top of your mind, not because the CI/CD is important, because you create replicable artifacts inside your Artifactory repository, but because you foster the right culture inside the organization. That is by far more compelling than deploying constantly your front ends. The last thing that I need to announce today for the first time, and is not public yet, so it would be interesting to see what you think about. I'm starting after the success of Dear Architects. So if you are looking at that newsletter, a new newsletter, it's called Micro-frontends newsletter. It's available here, so if you want to subscribe, it would be a pleasure. And the idea here is having, Dear Architects is, let's say, a weekly newsletter on architecture with five resources that I read during the week. Basically, I share with that. I started when I was VP of architecture with my team, and then they said, why you don't do for everyone? And I said, that's a brilliant idea. 5 years later, I'm still here doing that, and with 13,000 subscribers, so it's pretty successful. So I said, OK, let's do that with microfrontends. Now I have way more things to say, and there are more stuff that are coming. And therefore, I decided to do that for microfrontends as well, with obviously less cadence. So it won't be weekly, it will be probably fortnightly. But I will start probably next month when I finish to collect all the ideas that I have. That's all I got. I hope that you enjoy. And yeah, if you have any question or you want to pick my brain during the conference, I'm here the whole day. So thank you very much for having me. And